Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the second season of Reflections of a Slightly Conscious Being. I'm Sandra Lourenco, a music artist that is on a journey towards consciousness. I am not a licensed psychologist, therapist, or coach. All information I share here comes from personal experience and doesn't mean to replace any kind of professional help. All right, so today we are going to continue talking about criticism. We started talking about criticism on the last episode, episode 4. We talked about active criticism. This is when we assume the role of the critic.
Nobody asked for your opinion.
That is when we criticize something or someone else. Today, I'm going to talk about the passive role. This is when we are criticized. So how can we deal with criticism by others? So we all deal with criticism at some point in our lives, right? Some people are more natural critics than others, and some have a harder time receiving criticism. I have to say that I'm on both categories, which is actually a bit of a paradox if you think. I'm a natural critic, constructive critic, and we'll get there if you didn't see the last episode. Although if you didn't, I do recommend you go watch it first, okay? Even though I am a natural constructive critic, I do have a hard time receiving and dealing with criticism. Well, not so much anymore as I used to, but it's still something that I'm working on. Truth is, criticism can be positive or negative. It can also be constructive or simply destructive. So last episode, I categorized criticism as destructive or constructive and pointless or productive. Some of you thought this was a bit confusing, and so I made an infographic for you. You can actually download it free using the link in the description. All right. So here is the infographic for you. This is what I've done, all right? So we have the beginning. Let me zoom out. So you have the critic being given or taken, all right? And then we have the ending, which is if the critic is productive, constructive, pointless, constructive, or pointless, destructive. So we saw on the last episode that all destructive criticism is pointless. It's always pointless. There is no point. No one grows and nothing good comes out of it. But constructive criticism is not always productive because there are several conditions to consider when offering criticism, okay? Sometimes the receiver is just not open to receive criticism. Sometimes we are not experts in what we are commenting, or we don't have access to all information. So we think we're being helpful, but we're not. And so there are several factors, all right? But we'll talk about that, all right? So let's see the infographic here with you guys really, really quickly. Okay, we'll get back here on the course of the episode. All right, so we start with the critic being given or taken. So the very first step to categorize criticism is the critic positive or negative? All right, that's the first question you need to ask. Let's start with the positive because it's the easier one. Okay, if you're giving a positive review or a positive feedback to someone, basically I say that in this case it's always productive, constructive. And why is that? Because everybody loves to receive a compliment. A compliment is an example of a productive, constructive critic. So everybody loves it. Everybody loves to receive positive feedback, and it's never too much. So it's always productive, constructive. All right, even you think, oh, but the person will not be able to learn anything from it, but the person will feel appraised. It will feel better. We all love to receive a positive feedback. So it's always, for me, it's always productive, constructive. Okay. Now, if the critic is negative, so if you're mentioning something that you have a different opinion on, or you think should have been done differently, the next question you need to ask yourself is, does the critic help the receiver do or be better? So let's start with the no. Imagine that you're saying someone, this job is not well done. Okay, this is an example of a negative critic, right? Does this sentence help anyone do or be better next time? No, you're not saying what the person did wrong. You're just saying the person did something wrong, but you're not you're not offering constructive feedback, you're not mentioning what the person should have done differently, right? So no, this is an example of a critique that doesn't help anyone be better. So it's pointless destructive, okay? And sometimes we tend to associate pointless destructive with something that's offensive, and it doesn't need to be offensive all the time. But if you say something like that, if you just say something negative without adding anything to it, you can even say, I don't like your shirt. That's an example of a pointless destructive. Like, why are you even mentioning you don't like someone else's shirt, right? Okay. So imagine that instead of saying this, you say, the job you did, I think you should have done something specific on a different way. Okay, so this is an example of a critique that is negative, but you're actually telling the receiver how he should do or be better according to your own point of view. Okay, so this is a critique that will help the receiver do or be better. So the next question you need to ask, and this is the great turning point, right? Because most natural critics tend to think that if you're offering constructive criticism, is always good for the receiver, and it's not always the case. Okay, so you need to ask, okay, was the critique requested by the receiver? Is it my place to criticize? This is another question. This is another way you should ask this question, right? And if the critique was requested, or if it was your place, imagine that you hired someone to do something for you. So you're paying that person to do a job for you. So you are entitled to want things your way. And if he's a good employee, when I work for other people, I am the one who's always asking for critics. I'm asking for feedback from the person who hired me, because I want that person to be satisfied with what I've done. So in this case, is a yes. Okay, it's your job to criticize, or even the critique was requested by the receiver. In this case, you have a productive, constructive criticism, right? But if the critique was not requested, or if it's not your place to criticize, if you don't have access to all the information, the next question you need to ask is, was the receiver available for criticism? Okay, so this is a big turning point. It was a big turning point for me to realize this, because sometimes people are just not available to receive criticism, and we'll get there. Okay, in that case, it's pointless constructive. So you think you're being helpful, but you're actually not. So another example is when you're trying to help someone who knows a lot more about the issue at hand than you do. So maybe you don't have access to all information. So in all these cases, it's pointless constructive. So you're actually giving constructive feedback. There's an opportunity for learning, but the person is not learning because it's not the moment, or it's not the time, or it's not the place. Okay? If the receiver was available for criticism, even though it wasn't requested, it can be productive, constructive. We'll get there with examples. Maybe now it's a bit complicated. It will be easier, I assure you. All right. So let's start with destructive criticism. So how to act when someone uses this type of criticism with us. So we already mentioned last episode that destructive criticism is, well, your job sucks, like I just gave an example. You didn't do a good job. Or you suck. I don't like your voice. I've heard that. You have, your face looks like my neighbor's horse. That was the most creative critic I ever received. Anyway, so it's never okay to engage in this type of discussion, okay? And if you can't help yourself, you should take responsibility for it, okay? Nothing of the, oh, but he or she started it crap. That's crap, okay? That's excuses kids use in kindergarten. We are not children anymore. And being an adult is exactly also taking responsibility. It means to own your own emotions and have a grip on them, okay? Learn to let go and walk away. Let them have the ego trophy. You know, some people just like to have the last word in the argument or whatever. I assure you that's not a trophy worth having it. So let them having it. One of the ways to do that, and I know it sounds way easier said than done, okay? I've been there. My natural reaction what I learned from my parents was to react, okay? So we have to unlearn that behavior. And the very first step is learn to pause before reacting. So don't react straight away. Have a grip on yourself, pause, and then observe your reactions, feel your feelings. Don't put them out, okay? Just, okay, that person is provoking me or is saying something very rude, is being rude to me. And we feel all these emotions, right? Most of us tend to feel many things when subject to destructive criticism. And so it's important for us to remember that we are unconsciously programmed to react the same way and feel the negative feelings behind this type of criticism. We see it on social media, we see it on movies, we see it everywhere. It's the standard, unfortunately. So it helps immensely if you remember that this type of criticism says way more about the critic than the criticized or the person who's being criticized, okay? This fact will help you not to take the critic personally, all right? Someone who is using destructive criticism with you uses destructive criticism towards other people as well. It says way more about who they are, okay? So I know this is not easy, especially, me being an artist. Artists nowadays need to expose themselves a lot on social media, and social media and the internet is just everybody. It's so easy to criticize anonymously, right? So it's not easy. You put your heart and your soul in a video or in a piece of content, and then someone comes along and just trashes it, right? I used to answer back with a humorous response, never engaging in destructive criticism, but I used to answer back with a humorous response. But, now sometimes I don't even take the time to answer, and this is because I just, I don't even want to grace that person with an answer. It's not worth it. It's not worth my time. It's not even worth me thinking of a clever answer, right? And I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. It's okay to not say anything at all. It's okay to ask for time off or just turn away from this type of argument, okay? It's not easy though, but I assure you, you will start feeling really good about yourself once you start doing it successfully. And it gets easier over time. It just takes practice. Another thing that happens over time, which is really interesting that I observed, is that when you manage to deal with this type of situations remaining calm, these situations stop happening so much. I see there are people who have a lot of anger in them that kind of attract these situations, and they are always getting into arguments with other people. And for me, it's kind of, I don't even remember the last time I had an argument with someone or someone came to me being rude or being aggressive. And it's just because it's a matter of energy as well. If you start emanating a calm energy, and if you don't engage with this type of behavior, you also don't attract this kind of behavior. It's really amazing how this works, okay? And I know you may think, oh, that's theoretical, you're just assuming. I'm just speaking from experience, okay? I used to have that happen to me a lot more in the past when I had still anger issues to solve. So by my experience, this actually happened, all right? So once you learn to remain calm when subject to destructive criticism, you can even use it as a feedback for sensitive spots. For example, if someone criticizes a specific body part and you notice that you get offended, or you notice that that specific critic evoked more feelings from you, this means you have some kind of insecurity about that body part, and take that as an opportunity, as feedback to grow and work on yourself. This is actually a way to turn destructive criticism into productive, constructive criticism, right? So accepting ourselves as we are is the basis for not getting offended by anything and by anyone. All right. And this is all about dealing with destructive criticism. Again, if you want more about it, watch the last episode. Okay. We talked about it from an active point of view. Now let's talk about dealing with constructive criticism, all right? Again, from the receiver point of view. So this is when someone voices their opinions or preferences in a way that can be helpful to us, all right? Again, constructive criticism can be positive or negative, all right? When someone mentioned what was done right or wrong, or what we agree or disagree of, by our own point of view, of course, always take that in consideration, that a critic is given by the point of view, by the active part, the person who is offering you feedback. And it comes from a person that has different beliefs, it has different experiences than you. So don't get offended by it, okay? Just respect the uniqueness and individuality in every one of us, all right? So like we already mentioned, constructive criticism is not always constructive. And I know this may sound a bit weird. Let's say constructive criticism is not always productive. All right, I think that's easier. Criticism can be unwanted or even inappropriate in some situations, and we'll get there. We already saw a bit of those situations in the infographic. One piece of advice, though, if you're never open to constructive criticism, or you start noticing that there are more times that you are not available for constructive criticism than others, you should ask yourself why, all right? Some of us get offended by constructive criticism, especially when it's negative or very different from what we believe in. When we get offended, we usually get in defensive mode. And what is defensive mode? Is when we focus on defending our perspective, okay? We get defensive. The issue is when we enter defensive mode, we stop listening. And it's kind of like our brain power is totally focused on defending our own vision and arguments, our own point of view. So when the other person is talking and actually explaining their point of view or a different view, we are only thinking, our brains are only focused in finding the perfect argument or what we are going to say next. So basically, we are not actively listening to what the person is saying to us. We are just focusing on the response and the argument and the answer. So when this happens, the other person, the person who is trying to offer us advice, for example, will feel not heard. And so it will also enter defensive mode. The person will also focus on defending their own arguments. And it's easy to see that this can easily scale down into a destructive argument, because people will get more and more defensive. They will feel more and more unheard, and they will focus more and more in defending their own positions and their own points of view. So we all have sensitive spots. We all have themes that are hard for us to discuss. But sometimes the only way for us to even realize that we have these sore spots is to have someone pointing them out for us. So it's very important for us to learn to voice if and when we are open to constructive feedback or not, for sure. But it's also essential for us to question our reactions when we do receive criticism. Okay, I used to have a very strong tendency of over-justifying myself, of over-justifying my choices. And this happens usually when our parents are natural critics, all right? We tend to get, and this is actually, over-justifying our choices is a form of defensiveness, right? It's, I did that because this and this and that and that and that. And we just bomb the person who is trying to offering us advice with information, so that they feel, okay, maybe it's not my place to criticize you. You look like you thought about this, but basically it's just another form of defensiveness. Okay, sometimes when we receive advice from someone, which is advice is one form of constructive criticism, it's just not helpful. right? And why is that? Because sometimes we are just not in a mental or emotional receptive state for assimilating new information, okay? This happens, for example, when we are dealing with strong emotions. Imagine approaching a widow in her husband's funeral and try to give her advice about how to deal with grief. Imagine that you had to deal with grief at some point in your life, and you did some like activities that helped you immensely, or you read that book that was really life-changing. And imagine starting a conversation with the widow in a funeral about this. It will just not be helpful because she's not in learning mode. She's not on the receptive mode. And if you want to use the infographic for that, so basically you're actually giving, it's in this case, I would consider a negative because you're not reinforcing what she's doing right. You are giving her a different point of view. I wouldn't say even, I know I put this positive or negative, but basically what I mean by positive or negative is, positive is, okay, someone that you're saying someone that you guys are aligned and you think that's a good thing. When you say to someone this is a good thing, you're saying that you are on the same point of view as that person. So that's positive. Negative is when you have an opposite point of view, or you're just trying to offer a different point of view. All right. So in this case, I would consider negative because you're offering a different piece of advice. Does the critique help the receiver do better? Yeah, it can help, right? But was it requested? Definitely no. And was the receiver available for criticism? Definitely not, right? So it's pointless constructive. See, and this is how the infographic works. It's just there are some situations where we are just not open for it, all right? And we have reasons not to be, because we are dealing with strong emotions. So I know this may look like an exaggerated scenario, but I've seen people doing this in funerals, maybe in more subtle ways. They do this thinking they're being helpful, but and sometimes they are just trying to fill in the awkward silence. But the widow is probably filled with strong negative emotions, so she's not ready or open to advice yet, right? When we're dealing with strong emotions, it's okay to feel those emotions and express them in healthy ways. Okay, it's also okay to tell someone who is offering advice and trying to be helpful that, I really appreciate you're trying to help, but I'm just not ready for all that information right now. I'm so sorry. I just can't even pay attention. So please just let me feel my stuff. Just give me space, just give me space. And remember, people are just trying to help. It doesn't come from a bad place. It comes from a good place. But some people just don't allow themselves, so they're never learned to allow themselves to feel their emotions. And so they get very uncomfortable when they see other people expressing their own. Many people get uncomfortable by seeing other people crying. And this is just because sometimes they just never learn to allow themselves expressing their emotions. So when they see people expressing their emotions, they get uncomfortable, they get awkward, right? Trying to focus on solutions is sometimes a way of masking that awkwardness. So it's just that you just have, when someone is offering you advice and you are on a strong emotional, space, you are feeling your emotions, so you're focusing inwards. It's okay for just saying to someone, thank you so much. I know you're just trying to help me, but just say, right now I'm feeling all these feelings and I'm just not ready to listen. I'm not ready for advice. Okay, don't be afraid to ask, what I just need for you. I just need a shoulder to cry on, or I just need someone who listens as you vent or as you voice your feelings. It's also okay. It's a healthy way of putting all your feelings out there. And same thing happens even when you're with low mental or physical energy, all right? So sometimes it's not a matter of not having emotional, of being on a weird emotional space. Sometimes it's actually just low mental energy, all right? or mental or physical energy, right? If you're sleepy, if you're hungry, for example, you won't be able to enter learning mode. There are people who are more subject to this than others, and I'm laughing because my former partner used to be like that. He was a complete, there's there's that ad from Snickers, which is really funny,
Dan, eat a Snickers.
Why?
Because you turn into a right diva when you're hungry. Better? Better.
You're not you when you're hungry.
You are not you when you're hungry. It was hilarious because he was like that when he was hungry, when he was sleepy. Oh my gosh, he was so irritable, and he was so focused on his body needs that he wouldn't be able to listen. All right, there was a time that I took that personally. But, then I started seeing that, okay, that's his way of dealing when he's sleepy or hungry. And that's okay. I just have to respect when he's like that and not engage in this type of, in some kind of conversations that were more mentally or emotionally not draining, but that just required more mental or energy, right? So some people feel these basic needs more than others. All right, I'm a person that I always retain a lot of functionability when I'm hungry. When I'm sleepy, not that much. When I'm sleepy, I do get a bit more turned off. But I learned to voice that, so when someone is trying to engage on a conversation with me and I'm sleepy, I'm like, I'm really sorry, I just can't right now because I'm sleepy. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so what happens if you have a basic need that is not being fulfilled, being sleep or food, okay, this is a basic need of your body to function. Your body enters like energy saving mode, which means it's focusing its energy, its remaining energy in its basic needs. So most of your brain actually turns off. Same thing if you spend your whole day working or dealing with stressful situations, okay? Your body may be nourished, but your mentally energy for the day is depleted. We all have a quota of physical energy and mental energy that renovates itself every night or every time we eat, okay? Mental energy requires sleep. Physical energy doesn't require sleep so much. It requires food, all right? Or water, of course. So what happens is that when your mental energy is depleted, you're unavailable to process new information as well. So again, you won't be open to constructive feedback. Again, it's all about voicing this to others, all right? Instead of being grumpy, instead of just lashing out, just voice this to others. Not everyone can figure out if you're open to solutions or not. Some people are more conscious of that and are more aware. But people who deal with me already know that, yeah, when I'm hungry, not when I'm hungry, sorry, when I'm sleepy, I don't, my brain doesn't work the same way. I start shutting out and I say, I'm sorry, I'm sleepy. No, I'm not. And some people, oh, you're so quiet or you're not answering. Yeah, I'm sleepy. So it's key to voice these to others, okay? Because not everyone is the same. Not everyone's body reacts the same way when depleted. So just simply state that right now, I know, I'm so sorry, I'm tired, or I need to eat, or I'm just simply drained. I had a rough day. So I'm not open to criticism, okay? And still speaking about relationships, it's essential to respect that and not engage in difficult conversations or emotional conversations when one of the parties is just not in a good state, energetically speaking, all right? Because these are conversations that require a lot of energy and require focus, so your brain can be on optimal levels, so you can remain open, all right, and not shut down. So it's essential to have that attention. Also, attention, and don't focus, oh, but I need to express my feelings. Yeah, but maybe you should wait and give your partner time so we could be on the same space. You can mention, we need to talk about something. Are you available right now, or should we talk about this later? It's essential. Okay, respect other people's time. I know sometimes, if you're never available, and I mentioned this in the beginning of the video, if you're never available for this type of conversations, this is something that you should also assess and think, why is that? Why I'm never available for this type of conversations? Why am I always entering defensive mode? Why I engage in destructive criticism when someone is just trying to have a conversation with me? So it's important for us also to be our own judges and observe ourselves more impartially, if that makes sense. Again, looking at the infographic, another way of splitting criticism is by dividing it into productive and pointless, right? So we have here productive, constructive, and then we have two types of pointless criticism. We already mentioned that all destructive criticism is pointless, but constructive criticism can also be pointless if it's not given at the right person, at the right time, at the right place. Okay? Constructive criticism can also be pointless when someone tries to offer us advice in an area that we clearly know more about. And I mentioned this on the last episode as well. There's nothing wrong with people trying to help us though, so don't forget to stay humble, okay? I've received advice from people that, are not are not musicians. They are not artists themselves. I've received suggestions that were actually really good from those kinds of people, because sometimes, as their minds are not formatted, they don't have as much information. They can also think outside the box. That can be a good thing. But sometimes, they also offer some feedback that it just doesn't make sense by our own point of view and with the information we have. There's a saying, and I mentioned this on the last episode as well, that goes like this: don't take advice from people who are not where you want to be on the topic they're giving advice about. I wouldn't say it like this because of what I just mentioned, but I would say it like this. Be careful, or be mindful, I think mindful is a better word, when receiving advice from people who are not where you want to be on the topic they're giving advice about. Okay? For example, and I see this happening a lot, especially amongst my female friends. Be careful when receiving relationship advice from someone who is not in a healthy relationship from your own specific point of view, because we all have different descriptions and different ideal scenarios of what a healthy relationship is. Okay, this is really important. So I see so many people offering advice, and sometimes you look at their relationships and you think, is this something I would like for me? Is this a kind of relationship that I feel makes sense to me, or something that I aspire to or for? If the answer is no, you should, you should also always practice active listening. Listen to what that person is saying to you, but don't take it as truth, just, you process that information. Process the information someone is giving you, all right? Okay, thank you so much for your advice. I will think about that. And then you think about that. Does this make sense to me and for the kind of relationship that I want to have, all right? And what happens is, most times, if that person is not on a healthy relationship, even by their own point of view, if you're seeing someone who is always complaining about their relationships and then they are just trying to help you with your own relationship, should you even consider their advice? Always remember that all kinds of judgment are examples of pointless criticism. Every one of us is unique, and as such, we have different ways of expressing ourselves. And here, judgment, we are talking about, for instance, the clothes we wear, the hairstyles we have, the music we hear, cars we drive or not drive. These are all personal choices, and it's pointless of us to spend time and energy worrying about what other people may think. Again, these are all personal choices. There's no wrong or right. And it's pointless of us to spend time and energy worrying about what other people may think about our choices. We are talking about the passive mode. So when someone criticizes someone we have. Again, the media loves to voice their opinions about what the famous people do, where, or whatever they do or fail to do. So again, we're also programmed to judge others. All right. If you're emotionally and mentally available, take every constructive criticism and even destructive criticism as an opportunity to practice active listening, even if it is, in case of destructive criticism. Practice active listening inside yourself. Listen and observe your own feelings. Listen to what's being said to you and observe how you react to it. You don't have to think of an answer straight away because this is our programming, okay? You don't have to think of an answer straight away. It's okay if you don't even have an answer, okay? Someone can say something to you and you can say, all right, I will have to process that information. I will think about it. Thank you so much for offering me that piece of advice, for example. Just take it in and then think about if it makes sense to you, because sometimes, people are mentioning stuff and sometimes it makes sense for us in the moment, but then you start thinking about it and you start thinking, does this match the person, my ideal person, the person I want to be? Does this match my beliefs? Does this match what I think is right? And sometimes in the moment we tend to agree, but then if you think about it with yourself, maybe it doesn't make sense. All right. And there's nothing wrong with that. At least you had access to a different point of view and you have the opportunity to consider something that probably you wouldn't have considered it alone. So basically, when you are being criticized by someone, ask yourself, is this a productive or a pointless critic? Remember, productive criticism is something you can learn from. Pointless criticism includes all forms of destructive criticism and judgment. That is opinions, right? When someone doesn't like your shirt, well, all right, but I do like it. So not all constructive criticism is productive criticism. Again, for 3 different reasons. Okay, first, sometimes we are just not in the right place to receive it, right? And I mentioned right place emotionally or mentally, right? Sometimes we just don't have the energy. Second reason, sometimes the person making the remark is not qualified or aligned with our personal goals. Remember, be mindful when receiving advice from people who are not where you want to be on the topic they're giving advice about. Third, sometimes criticism comes from personal preferences and opinions or beliefs which are different than yours. And that's okay. Live and let live. And the James Bond movie is Live and Let Die, but it's so much harder to live and let live. Isn't it? And there you go. I hope this episode was helpful to you. As always, feel free to comment, like, share, reach out, and all of that. Meanwhile, if you have ideas or suggestions for future topics, reach me at mail@sandralourenco.pt. See you next week.